inviting Dr. Bhushan for his invited talk, I would like a brief introduction. Dr. Bhushan Boritkar is currently engaged as a research faculty, come associate professor at Symbiosis Center for Medical Imaging Analysis, Symbiosis International University, Pune. He also has adjunct appointments at the Laboratory for the Treatment of Medical Information, Brest, France, as a senior research scientist, and at the Division of Biomedical Engineering, University of Cape Town, South Africa, as an honorary senior lecturer. Dr. Bhushan Boritkar finished his Master of Science degree from University of Texas, USA in 2003, and his PhD from Cleveland State. He then worked as a postdoctoral fellow at National Institute of Health, USA, till 2014. From 2014, excellence. Let him. Dr. Boritkar's research interests are focused on developing clinical tools and processes using emerging engineering technology. Three domains. Number one, musculoskeletal disorders and sports injuries in adult children, computer-assisted orthopedic surgery, joint implants, medical device design. Third, advances in medical image acquisition, analysis, and synthesis. Dr. has published extensively in peer-reviewed journals, international conferences. He has written so many book chapters on his research and has provisional patent application on his name. Dr. Bhushan Borit extensive collaboration worldwide for his research work. He has been involved in international research team to do collaborative projects with global research network. We are also in touch with Dr. Bhushan. One of my research student is also working in collaboration with Dr. Bhushan, and MNIT Allahabad is working. Electronics and Applied Mechanics Department of MNIT Allahabad is also working in collaboration with Dr. Bhushan from last 4-5 years. So now I invite Dr. Bhushan for his invited talk. Dr. Bhushan.
Thank you, Professor Tiwari. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, because there is some kind of work going on just on the top floor. So I was trying to get in a quiet location. I hope it's not so much disturbing. If you cannot hear me at any point, just let me know, okay?
Yes, sir. Now you can start.
So thank you, Professor Tiwari, for your kind introduction and inviting me for this FDP session on robotics. Good morning, fellow faculties and researchers. You have been listening to robotics lectures for past few days, I believe. But today, I'm going to give it a human touch, and I mean it literally. So let me start with asking you a quiz about robotics. And I expect all of the attendees to participate in either typing their answers or voicing their answers to me. So my first question would be, what kind of controls do you consider when designing a robot manipulator? Can anybody suggest or type their answers? Tiwari sir, is it possible to see the chat?
Sir, we have a WhatsApp group, and if anyone wants to put his queries, we can then tell you, sir.
Okay, then
chat box is not open for the outside speaker, outside from MNIT, we can say.
Okay, so
we are taking the queries through WhatsApp group, and then we will, after this session, participants can ask their questions.
Okay, so I cannot make it interactive if I want, right?
No, you can make it interactive. They can unmute themselves and then can ask anything, or you can ask them anything. It's up to you,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, so if
But
can
that
I
box is not able for this outside participants from outside MNIT.
Good morning,
Okay.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir. Sir, I think, sir, the kind of controls we need is like we have to fix degrees of freedom, sir. We have to make degrees of freedom the major constraint before designing process.
Right. Degrees of freedom. Anybody else? Any other answer? I'll take one more answer.
Work volume, sir.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Work volume.
Work volume. You mean the range of the manipulator extension that you want to reach? Yeah. Someone else?
Motion control.
Motion control. Yes. So we have these kind of controls that we need to consider when we design it. Now, what strategies would you see that I think you just had a lecture on biped locomotion robotics. So what kind of strategies would you use for designing a biped locomotion robot? Can I get a couple of answers?
Stability.
Okay, stability and
Weight of the legs.
weight of the legs, mass, yes. Anyone else? Do we use pendulum theory there? Okay, so now considering what you've learned so far in robot manipulator design or biped locomotion robot design, let's ask what strategies change when you want to have a robot interface with a human movement. I'll take a couple of answers now.
Sensors is required, sir.
Sensors is a must. Is that what you're saying?
Sir, there are various sensors that can
Yeah.
be used to identify the various positions and various things.
Right. So is sensor a must when you have a robotic interface with a human movement?
Tactile sensors, sir. Vision.
Okay.
Camera. Lidar or something.
Okay. Anyone else? So here what point I'm trying to make is that when you consider a robot to have an interface with a human movement, many strategies change as against when you just want to design a robot and use it for some other applications other than human interfaces. And why is that is what we are going to see in this lecture. So in biology, exoskeleton is a kind of external covering on an animal to protect or support it. For example, the shell of a crab. In the engineering field, the concept of the exoskeleton type system is an extension of the exoskeleton in biology, which refers to systems that expand or augment a person's physical abilities. Now, a robotic exoskeleton are considered a wearable robotic units which are controlled by computer boards to power a system of motors, pneumatics, levers, or even hydraulics to restore locomotion. Now, exoskeletons have segments and joints that correspond to some extent to those of human body. And that's why I said that we need to change the strategy when we are designing these robotic systems as against other robots. Exoskeletons extend, complement, substitute, or enhance the human function and capability, or to empower the human limb where it is worn out. Now, upper and lower skeletons could offer humans the kind of protection, support, enhancements, and sensing which they afford in nature. There is one-to-one correspondence between human anatomical joints and the robot joints or sets of joints. This kinematic compliance is a key aspect, and I stress on this. This is a key aspect in achieving ergonomic human-robot interfaces. Taking into account that humans and exoskeletons are in close physical interaction, there is an effective transfer of power between the human and the robot. So we can divide the exoskeletons in kind of three broader categories. The first category is human performance augmentation exoskeletons. These are used for increasing strength, endurance, and other physical capabilities by able-bodied individuals. This type of exoskeleton could be used for lifting heavy objects, as you might have seen everywhere, carrying heavy loads over large distances, or working with heavy tools. The likely settings for these devices are in the warehouses, construction sites, emergency relief operations, or even military bases and excursions. The second broad category is assistive devices for individuals with disabilities. Disabilities such as stroke, spinal cord injury, muscle weakness, and other neurological or musculature disorders can lead to difficulty in walking or making in any daily routine activities. The assistive robotic exoskeletons can allow these users to complete movements they could not complete on their own. So, for example, many of these exoskeletons are intended to allow an individual with a lower limb paralysis to walk with the aid of the crutches, as you can see in this picture. The third broad category is therapeutic exoskeletons for rehabilitation. Now, these devices can assist, resist, or even perturb the user's movements to achieve rehabilitative solutions. They can train an individual's muscle or nervous system. They can help overcome the limitations of disabilities when they are not using the exoskeleton. These are some devices that can cross over between assistive exoskeletons and therapeutic exoskeletons. These are bifunctional exoskeletons, and they could eventually be helpful for therapy as well as increasing the current physical capabilities of the individual. So there are other classifications for exoskeletons as well. According to the principle of action, they could be divided into active or passive exoskeletons. Active devices use external power source, whereas the mechanics of the passive exoskeletons relies on the kinetic energy and human strength. Exoskeletons can also be classified according to the human limb onto which they are used. Thus, they can be an upper limb exoskeleton or a lower limb exoskeleton or a full body exoskeleton. A number of investigators, they have devoted the application of exoskeletons to these upper or lower or full body limbs. The rehabilitation field is a key application domain for the development of exoskeletons to help disabled people with difficulties in moving. For these applications, the exoskeleton permits to assist in several active and passive therapies. Thus, a device replicates movements and exercises that a physiotherapist executes when working with a patient is an exoskeleton. This exoskeleton should be able to replicate with the patient, the movements performed with the therapist during the treatment. And that's why it is important that the design strategies and integration strategies for the exoskeleton with the human musculoskeletal system are crucial and key. Well, there are a significant number of papers that are published concerning the robotic exoskeleton in therapy and about their effectiveness and functional recovery in different pathologies or musculoskeletal disorders. Some studies conclude that robot-aided therapy can elicit improvements in upper or lower limb functions. Most of the reports in the literature using the exoskeletons focus on the treatment of the stroke, paralysis in upper and lower limbs. Other works concern for other rehabilitation purposes, but not so many. Exoskeletons, they are biomechatronic devices that interact with the human body. The human motor control system can be modeled as shown in the diagram here, where it has a part of a mechanical structure which is called a plant, which represents the skeleton and passive tissues, the actuator, which represents the muscles, and a controller, which represents the central nervous system and receives sensory feedback from the physiological sensors. Whereas an artificial motor control system, which is our exoskeleton, work in parallel with this human motor control system and can be modeled with the same components as the human motor control system. A plant which represents the mechanical structure and passive elements such as springs and dampers, and an artificial controller that receives the data measured from the sensors and generates control signals to operate these actuators. Now, there are three kinds of interactions between the human motor control system and artificial motor control system. These are the detection of motion intention of the user. What kind of motion this user intend to do, that has to be detected accurately and correctly. Then the provision of feedback to the user regarding the state of the artificial motor control system and the human motor control system or the environment. And the third kind of interaction needed is an exchange of mechanical power between plants, and this is very important. We'll come back to this. There are several aspects of the biomechatronics that could be incorporated while developing these exoskeletons. First, bioinspiration could be extended in the development of mechatronic systems. For example, the development of bio-inspired mechatronic components, that is, the structure, actuators, and control architectures. Second is exoskeletons permit information exchanging between the device and humans. Thus, bioelectric signals such as EMGs or EEGs or EOGs could be used to control the exoskeleton and permit a more natural interaction without using external push buttons or joysticks or other elements for control. So far, any questions that you can have? If there are no questions, I will go ahead. So what are the design considerations when we are designing these exoskeletons? Obviously, they work very close to human body. Thus, we must consider following aspects when we are designing them. First, the external framework should replicate the structure of the upper or lower limb or the limb where it is going to get attached. Second, this exoskeleton device should be lightweight, strong, and safe. Third, there must be a possibility of changing the elements to permit the skeleton, the exoskeleton structure to be length adaptable. Example, think of a growing child having an exoskeleton. And fourth, exoskeleton should perform a range of movements required to accomplish the activity or function, as with any other manipulator. Now, one of the biggest challenges for robotic exoskeletons that interface with persons closely is to assure the safety of the user. Now, it is important to establish the safety guideline appropriate for elderly and disabled human users. Forget about only the healthy individuals. And also to develop and integrate both mechanical and electrical safety systems in these exoskeletons. Further, to meet the stringent standards, we need to incorporate redundant safety mechanisms in the design of these exoskeletons. And we'll come back to these a little bit later. But we will start now with some kind of early developments or with a brief history. The first mention of this device, which looked like an exoskeleton, was Jan's running aid, which was patented back in 1890. And it was a simple bow leaf spring operating parallel to the legs, where the function was to augment running and jumping. Then there are studies on wearable equipment that have been going on for more than 50 years by military institutions, private companies, and research groups in multiple countries. The main components for the development of the exoskeleton robots, they include design technology, human intent measurement technology, human robot control technology, and so on. For the successful development of these robotic systems, designers should take into consideration the field of application, the purpose of the power support, to which part of the body the robot would give support, and so on and so forth. So in late 60s, in 1966, the GE company got funded by military institutions of USA, and they developed and tested what the researcher called a body amplifier prototype based on a master-slave system. This was called Hardy-Man. The Hardy-Man stands for Human Augmentation Research and Development Investigation, Hardy-Man. The prototype didn't get complete. It was abandoned in 1968, but the concept was born in 1968 about the master and slave configuration in which the two overlapping exoskeletons were implemented. The inner one was set to follow the human motion, whereas the outer one was implemented with a hydraulic empowered system. The other research projects were conducted in Serbia in 70s and also in MIT in USA in 1980s. However, between 80s and up to 2000, very few studies were carried out, mostly because of the fundamental technological limitations, especially in the control hardware. And at the end of the 20th century, defense wing of US Defense Department, which is called DARPA, started new efforts in the development of these exoskeletons, and they came up with a DARPA upper arm exoskeleton. Many results have been published since the beginning of the 21st century now, in last 20 years, as well as several reviews have been published discussing the state of the art and future perspectives of these exoskeletons. Now let's talk briefly about currently available exoskeletons and state of the art in upper extremity exoskeletons. The primary application of these upper limb exoskeletons they were originally teleoperation and power amplification. An example was European Space Academy's human arm exoskeleton, which was again a master-slave construct. Later, the exoskeleton applications were considered for the rehabilitation and assistance of disabled or elderly population. For example, the limb orthosis. The example of upper limb exoskeleton is wearable orthosis for tremor assessment and suppression, which was called VOTAS, which was designed in 2003, and you can see it here. It was presented within the framework of the another project called DRIFTS, and was a promising solution for patients who couldn't use medication due to the tremors. The exoskeleton VOTAS, it exhibits 3 degrees of freedom corresponding to the elbow flexion extension, forearm pronation supination, and wrist flexion extension, while they restrict the abduction adduction movements of the wrist. Then a 4 degree of freedom power assisted exoskeleton was designed in 2007 by Kiguchi, which assists the shoulder vertical and horizontal flexion extension motion, elbow flexion extension motion, and forearm pronation supination motion. This was an example of an effective EMG based control method for the activation of the exoskeleton according to the user's motion intention. Then other devices for upper limb rehabilitation were labeled as coaching devices. They do not generate any forces, but they provide specific feedback and accordingly act upon it. These devices serve as an input interfaces for interactions with the therapeutic games in virtual reality using video-based motion recognition, etc. Then some system for rehabilitation of fingers or hands have also been designed with higher number of degrees of freedom. Prominent examples include one developed in 2008 by Hasegawa with 11 degrees of freedom, and second one by Fleischer in 2009 with 20 degrees of freedom. Then in the past years, when you look at the upper extremity exoskeletons, several companies have been developing, this is a lower extremity exoskeleton. My title is wrong. Several companies have been developing these lower body robotic exoskeletons that allow paraplegics or wheelchair users to stand and walk or even climb stairs. So these robotic devices, they use battery powered electric motors to actuate hip and knee joints and sometimes also ankle joints. And they are controlled by motion or signals from sensors and microcomputers. One such example is Bleeks, which was developed in 2006 and was the first load carrying and energetically autonomous exoskeleton. With an anthropomorphic design, this Bleeks exoskeleton has left and right 3-segment legs, being analogous to the human thigh, shank, and foot. The next one was Revok Robotics, which was developed in 2011 and became available internationally in 2012. So this was developed by Dr. Amit Ghaffar, who is an Israeli scientist and who himself became quadriplegic after an accident in 1997. So he put himself to the task and developed this Revok rehabilitation system. This system consists of, as you can see it in the picture, metal braces that supports the legs and part of the upper body. It has electric motors that supply movement of the hips, knees, and ankles, and a tilt sensor and a backpack that contains computer and power supply. Then came an allied product device by Rex Bionics called Rex Rehab and Rex Personal. The Rex was designed specifically for users with high levels of mobility impairment including paraplegic and quadriplegic users. And it allows them to navigate stairs and ramps in a safe environment. In contrast to the Rewalk, Rex does not require any crutches or walking frame to provide stability. The device is powered by DC motors and is controlled by a simple keypad and joystick. Now here is a controller. Then came Indigo powered leg orthosis, which was designed in Germany from a research at which was presented in a world prosthetics or orthosis conference in 2014 in Germany, and was designed at Vanderbilt University in USA. It's a battery powered lower body exoskeleton, as you can see it in the picture. It provides up to 4 hours of use and weighs about 12.5 kilograms. The exoskeleton uses gyroscopes and other inertial sensors that allow it to mirror natural human movement. It has LED indicators and a wireless software interface which provide control over parameters such as stride length, and step frequencies. Then came 2016. There's a company called Cyberdean, which is a spin-off from the University of Tsukuba. It developed a full body skeleton, as you can see here, which is mainly used for non-military applications, such as nursing and assisting the disabled in walking. The system was certified to ISO International Quality Standard for medical devices and by the Global Safety Certificate. This system uses sensors on the user's skin for detecting myoelectric signals for estimating intended motion. Based on these signals, servo motors produce the same torque as that is caused by the contraction of the human muscle and synchronize the movement of the exoskeleton with the intention of the user. Now, the controller of this system uses battery-powered small PCs that are equipped with wireless network cards, and they are located in the back of this exoskeleton. Then there are certain research projects such as the Atlas project, which is an active orthosis, which has been developed for gait assistance, in particular among children who are quadriplegic. The first prototype of this Atlas exoskeleton provided active motion of the hip and knee flexion extension with ankle flexion extension under actuated. The aim of these actual Atlas project designers was to be completely autonomous, in which the user only supply locomotion maneuver triggers, for example, start and stop or stand up and sit down, and then the exoskeleton would be able to manipulate the movements. Then came the wearable walking helper, which is still famous, is a wearable gravity compensating hip knee exoskeleton. You can see it here. No, you cannot see. Yeah, I didn't put it here. So basically, it is the assistive. It gives assistive torques provided by their actuators, and it is proportional to the ones that are calculated based on approximated human body model. And this is based on user postures and motions. Then came a XOR prototype in 2011, which was developed for the postural control of the elderly people and persons with mobility disability. The XOR is implemented with a hybrid driving concept, combining a pneumatic artificial muscles and electric motors. The pneumatic muscles, they act as a gravity balance, while the electric motors act as a dynamic compensator. The user's posture is defined by joint angles and ground reaction forces, while the motion intention is estimated based on EMG signals. Now, before I go forward, do we have any questions?
Participants, do you have any question? You can ask, please. No questions, sir.
Okay, thank you. So let's move ahead. So let's see some design and implementation concepts of these exoskeletons, which are similar to what you already learned or what you already know about general robotic manipulator designs. But I will just briefly describe them here for the sake of completeness. Yeah. So kinematics in general can be defined as a branch of mechanics dealing with the description of motion of bodies or fluids without reference to the forces that produce this motion. But when referring the kinematics to the multi-body joint mechanics in case of robots, and more specifically for exoskeletons, kinematics deals with analysis of motion of each robot link with respect to a reference frame. Kinematics in robotics involves an analytical description of motion as a function of time and the nonlinear relationship between the robot and effector position, as well as the orientation and robot configuration. The mobility M of a robot is composed of a number of links is defined as a number of independent parameters Q required to fully specify the position of every link. A particular robot configuration is a vector of realizable values of this Q with QIs, basically, with I ranging from 1 to n for the independent parameters at time t. The redundancy of a robot is an indicator of the number of available robot configurations for a particular position of end effector position. High redundancy, in fact, makes the control complex, but it improves dexterity. From the explanations, there may be a forward or an inverse relationship between the robot position and orientation and its configuration. We can use any type of coordinate system such as Cartesian coordinate system, cylindrical or spherical coordinate system to determine robot position. The selection of particular coordinate system depends on the kinematic structure of the robot. However, it must be kept in mind that to integrate the robot motion with that of the human musculoskeletal system, the links should move as per the human joints, and thus a joint coordinate system needs to be placed in your robotic linking system to translate and rotate the multi-link robot exoskeleton as per the human joints. Dynamics now is a part of a classical mechanics. Typically, it studies objects in motion that cause and the causes of motion, right? So for example, one cause of motion is force. Now, when considering this for exoskeletons specifically such as wearable robots, dynamics deals with the analysis of movement in a configuration and working space as a function of internal forces. For example, torque at each joint actuator and external forces. For example, interaction force with an environment. Now, two instances of the relationship between the force and movement can be identified: the forward dynamic problem and an inverse dynamic problem. The forward dynamic model problem expresses the evolution of the joint and working coordinates as a function of force and or torque. The inverse dynamic model describes the forces and torques as a function of joint coordinates. Well, in robotics, we all know that we can use Newtonian and Lagrangian mechanics to derive the dynamic model of a robot. A Newton-Euler formulation is based on the description of mechanics in vector functions of linear and angular velocities. As you can see here in the first equation, It's F equal to ma, simple. F is a force, m is a mass, v dot is in a linear acceleration of the link. Whereas in the other equation, which is torque, T is a torque, I is the inertial matrix, and omega is the angular velocity of the link. Now, when you consider Lagrange-Euler formation, it is based on scalar functions as in the equation shown here, where we have Qi, which is generalized coordinates. In this case, our link articulates. Then tau is a vector of forces applied and applied pairs in the Lagrangian, which is a function. K is a kinetic energy of the system, and mu is a potential energy. Now, in addition, equations of motion are equations that describe the behavior of the system as a function of time. Robot dynamics can be represented by linear state space variable equations. On the other hand, the interaction between different links is described by nonlinear differential equations. It is possible now to use the state space formulation for control designs in either the nonlinear or even linear forms. Yeah. So how do we integrate the exoskeleton, or what factors do we consider when integrating this with the musculoskeletal system? There are multiple considerations that we must adhere to when we are designing this type of exoskeleton, which relates to the biomechanics of a human joint system. The exoskeleton should be anthropomorphic and ergonomic, and not only in shape but also in function. The exoskeleton should be analogous to the human limbs in case of the joint positions and distributions of degrees of freedom. In most of the cases, designing the kinematics of an exoskeleton generally consists of trying to replicate human limb kinematics. Now, this approximation has a major disadvantage due to the fact that it is impossible to replicate human kinematics with a mechanical structure and conventional robotic joints. Does everybody agree with me that it is impossible to replicate? And can you explain me why it is impossible to replicate? I'll take a couple of answers here.
Because our anatomy structure are very difficult to achieve that much for a mechanical component.
Yes, it is difficult to personalize a anatomical structure in a mechanical component. Anyone else? Okay, so let me go ahead. So basically what happens is our morphology varies between one person to another. And then there are several models of human kinematics in the biomechanics literature, which differ in some aspects due to some complex geometry, some redundancies, some degrees of freedom of the human limbs, and so on and so forth. So basically why it is impossible, because we want to make the exoskeleton person specific or personalize it to the person specific movements and anatomical variability, which is impossible because then we will have to manufacture each exoskeleton specific to that person, then which is not cost effective at all. Then there is a unpredictability of the joint access locations and body segment sizes, and these can disturb interaction between an exoskeleton and the human operator depending on the exoskeleton's kinematic design. So that also again is a safety issue. As you can see here, while designing wearable exoskeletons, we face multiple problems where typical biomechanics effects cannot be easily captured for exoskeleton development. Imagine we want to develop an exoskeleton for this kid to walk normally, naturally, or with less energy expenditure. why it is so difficult to have the exoskeleton here is there is an intersubject variability of human limb link parameters such as length of bones, distance between rotation axis, orientations of the rotation axis, etc., which needs to be personified. Then the variability within an individual subject of joint centers of rotations during the movement. That means the same movement, you can have a variability of the joint centers of rotation within same walking movement. So if the person walk 10 times on the floor in a straight line, there are different centers of joint centers of rotation during this movement. So it is not consistent. And we are talking about disabled individuals who have more variability in any type of locomotion they do. So this can cause misalignments in the joint axis of exoskeleton and human joints. Then there is an intersubject variability of the body segment dimensions such as mass, size, volume, and so forth. So you have to adjust the exoskeleton parameters every time you change every time you have a different person to adhere to. Now, this is an unavoidable kinematic incompatibility between the robot and a human limb, which causes several problems, which is unwanted reaction force in the human joints or shear forces or even additional pressure at the attachment points. And these needs to be considered when you're designing an exoskeleton. One important aspect of these exoskeleton interaction, it relies on an adequate transmission of a mechanical power generated by an exoskeleton to the human body. Now, transmitting power from a device to the human body is challenging. Why? Because biological tissues and interfaces deform and displace when forces are applied. And when they are displaced, they absorb power. So we need to cater to this absorption of power when we are designing or transmitting power. So the part of the mechanical power generated by the exoskeleton is not used for the enhancement of the human motor performance, but it is absorbed in compression of these soft tissues or lost in unwanted effects such as skin stretch or tissue stretch or slipping of the exoskeleton with respect to the skin, etc. So there are effective ways for the exoskeletons to transmit mechanical power to the body, and these are designed and defined and tried out. So exoskeletons interact with human body by means of multiple physical contact points. These are, we can use a wide physical interface such as a cuff or orthosis to smoothly transmit, so distribute the load from the exoskeleton to the user. Human robot physical interface, they should be designed to provide a safe and comfortable interaction when we transmit power from exoskeleton to the humans. Conventional shell and strap style attachments are found on most of the exoskeletons in the literature or even in the market. These systems consist of a rigid or semi-rigid shell with one or more strap style fasteners and padding for subject comfort. Here you can see this is my previous lab in NIH in Bethesda in USA, where this is just recent, so I'm not part of this study, but they have recently developed an exoskeleton for children with cerebral palsy. So, considering interaction with humans when we are developing technologies for exoskeleton is important. Robotic exoskeletons involve sensors, actuators, mechanical structures, algorithms, and control strategies capable of acquiring information to execute a motor function. A key feature of exoskeleton is the direct interaction between humans and the device. This aspect could be divided now into two categories. One is cognitive human-robot interaction, and second is physical human-robot interaction. A cognitive human-robot interaction relates to how the user controls the exoskeleton, whereas a physical human-robot interaction relates to the application of the control forces between the human and the exoskeleton. Now, interaction of exoskeleton with the user involves three main modules: sense, decision, and execution. Developing robotic exoskeletons relates to including technologies to accomplish function of each module so that we have a success with the interaction. The sense module requires the information data from the human operator as well as device sensors. The decision module interprets the sensing information and organizes the activities in the whole system. The execution model, on the other hand, is responsible for actuation and providing mechanical power. Now, acquiring information from the human operator for this cognitive human-robot interaction could be implemented using bioelectric signals such as EMG, electromyogram, which evaluates and records physiologic properties of muscles, EEG or electroencephalogram, which monitors brain waves, and EOG, which is oculogram, which monitors eye movements. Now, physical human-robot interaction involves acquiring kinematics and kinetic information. A critical aspect while designing the exoskeleton relates to measurement of these interaction forces between the device and the user limbs, which can be used to assess the performance of the user in executing a task. A common way to measure interaction force or torque. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Is it okay if I continue?
Sir,
Yes,
we
sir.
have a next session at 12, sir. So please
Yes.
give some time to the participants for question and answer, sir.
Yes, definitely. So a common way to measure an interaction force is to adapt a force sensor between the cuff and the exoskeleton link, which then provide accurate measurements. Another technological aspect we need to focus on is an actuator. There are several actuator technologies that have been used to provide mechanical power for exoskeletons, which include pneumatic, hydraulic, and electric actuators. We have pneumatic and hydraulic actuators which provide more power but have less precision, whereas electric actuators have more precision but do not provide very good power to weight ratio. Then there is a series elastic actuator, which is called C actuator, which is typically used and implements a continuously variable transmission between a motor and the series elastic element. When selecting actuators for the exoskeleton, it is required to define an appropriate location, which is also an important design aspect. Actuators could be located close to the joints that are actuated. This configuration simplifies power transmission by using a direct drives on the joints. However, it increases the weight of the distal part of the exoskeleton, and the inertia makes it more difficult to control the overall system. On the other hand, locating the actuators in the part that remains constrained reduces the weight and inertia of the distal part. However, a mechanical power transmission mechanism is required. Now, this complicates the mechanical structure and may lead to difficulties with control due to some friction issues. Then comes a aspect of control for exoskeleton. What is the current state of control? In most of the exoskeletons today, myoelectric control is used. However, myoelectric control is a difficult part or difficult mechanism to achieve. From the ability to extract proper muscle activity information for most of the potential users, the future of the simultaneous multifunctional control application relies on producing reliable control schemes utilizing robust representations of the muscle synergies. And biomechanists and exoskeletal designers have kind of agreed upon the fact that myoelectric controllers should be developed further. The future directions of these developments would lie in three main areas: development of the real-time control applications and standardized metrics to compare performance across different techniques and improve the surface electromyography recordings, use of high density surface EMGs, and development of hybrid prediction and learning schemes such as adaptive learning and pre-trained models. In conclusion, I personally think that it is a great time to be in the field of robotic exoskeletons. There are technological advancements in the hardware as well as in software, which are making new designs and prototypes, which were not feasible 10 years ago. There is a continued interest in funding exoskeleton research. Wearable sensors will provide new information on human intent and motor status. Big data algorithms will need to be incorporated to mine the vast amount of physiological signals that are getting available, and machine learning techniques that take advantage of apprenticeship training enable dizzying array of tricks on the design of exoskeletons. With this, thank you for your attention, and I'll take any questions that you may have.